The number of coronavirus cases in the United States has risen to nearly 86,000, passing Italy and China, and the death toll in America is nearly 1,300. Joining us now, former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He also is a CNBC contributor and serves on the boards of Pfizer and Illumina. Doctor, welcome. It's good to see you, and I know you've got another piece out about. Actually, you're looking through the next. Looking through this to maybe a second wave, or if this becomes something we need to deal with again, we need to get more prepared. Obviously, the world does next time. But I've seen conflicting things. I've seen it stated as fact in certain news articles that we've already run out of PPEs or ventilators or things like that. And then I heard it walked back, that's the forecast if it gets worse, or if some of these projections of doubling and tripling, if that happens. Do you know at this point, are there people that are being denied ventilators in the United States at this point?
Not that I've seen. I've looked at the data in New York, the census data in some of the New York hospitals. They still have a few available ICU beds and ventilators and some open beds, but they're likely to fill them up this weekend. So I think we're going to start seeing patients move into the overflow settings like the Javits Convention Center and some of the field hospitals that they've set up. I mean, certainly the New York modeling shows that they're going to run out of critical care beds and ventilators probably within a week or a week and a half if they don't get more supplies. They're getting some more supplies, but they're unlikely to have enough, at least right now, based on what they have and what they're getting to get through this entire epidemic. So hopefully there'll be additional supplies coming into the city.
Enough? Or the 30,000 number that we keep hearing, I tried to do some of the math on that implies. And Governor Cuomo has not been one for exaggerating things, but that implies a lot more cases and a lot more of the serious cases that he at times talks about being only, I think, 3% of the total, right?
Well, the percentage getting intubated is higher than that. I'm not sure where the 3% is. That might be right. The governor said that. The modeling that we did early on had a lower total. What the governor's been putting out as ranges, and I think the bigger number is one side of the range right now. And a lot of the models don't bake into account or don't take into account all the impact of the mitigation steps we're taking, these stay-at-home orders, because it's hard to model that. That said, New York is going to be overrun. Their hospitals are not going to be able to keep up, and they're going to have to put patients into these ancillary sites that they're building right now. And they're definitely going to press their supply of ventilators. There's no question about it. And I would suspect, based on what we're seeing right now, that they don't have enough right now. They're going to need thousands more based on the flow that we're seeing and the new cases that are building day by day.
Right. So each day that goes by, what Governor Cuomo is talking about, we're getting closer to it, but we're not there yet. You think the mitigation efforts will not be sufficient to head that off? So there will be doctors making decisions on who gets a ventilator and who won't eventually. Doctor, it hasn't happened yet, but you think that's inevitable?
No, I don't think anything's inevitable. I certainly hope not. I think we should be pouring massive resources into New York with the expectation we can move that around. If you look at what happened in China, China initiated their lockdown. 6 weeks later, the number of cases peaked. 4 weeks later, hospitalizations peaked. So hospitalizations will lag the peak in the number of cases. If New York does, in fact, peak in the next 2 weeks in terms of the total number of cases in the city, and that would be the optimistic scenario, their hospitalizations are going to continue to rise for another 2 to 4 weeks after that. So even if the city starts to peak and can look at the other side of the apex in terms of their epidemic, the hospitals aren't going to be out of the woods for at least another 6 weeks, maybe longer than that in terms of the burden on the healthcare system in New York City. So they've got a long way to go.
So what, in terms of the next response, give us some of, I think you had 3 or 4 really key things that we need to prepare for if there's a second round of COVID-19 or something similar. We need testing, all the things we've talked about all along, I think.
Right. Well, the question is, what is this going to look like in the United States? Is this a regional epidemic and New York's the epicenter? Or are we going to have multiple epicenters of the epidemic? And when you look around the country right now, with Detroit with 717 cases, Miami with 600, Dallas with 300, Chicago with almost 1,000, New Orleans with almost 1,000, and a parish with one of the highest death rates per capita of any place in the country by a lot. This is starting to look more and more like a national epidemic with multiple epicenters of spread. based on what we're seeing, the growth we're seeing in the cities. And so that's going to be a much different scenario. It's going to be a longer epidemic. We're going to have a very tough April. This is going to last through April before we can get to the apex of the epidemic curve. In terms of what we need widespread screening, widespread surveillance so we can detect cases very quickly. This is after the epidemic peaks when we start coming down and we want to withdraw some of these population-based tactics. You need very broad screening of the population. You need a point-of-care diagnostic so doctors can swab people in their offices and diagnose people very easily. We're going to need a therapeutic. We're not going to get a vaccine in the near term. It's probably a year or two away. But there's no reason we can't have an antibody drug that can target the virus like what Regeneron is working on, or a direct-acting antiviral that can be used to treat people who have the infection, hopefully earlier in the course of infection, to prevent people from getting in trouble. And that's what Gilead and many others are working on. So I think we will have a therapeutic probably by the late summer, early fall at the latest, and I hope earlier than that. Regeneron has said they can have thousands of doses, hundreds of thousands of doses available in the late summer. And the screening system we should be able to get in place. We have the capacity to do that now. Within weeks and certainly months, we should have a very broad surveillance system in place in this country.